Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a stack of fascinating sources in front of us today, and yeah, we're ready to unpack them.
Absolutely. This is a really interesting one, I think, because it digs into the nitty-gritty of changing something that's already working,
Mm.
which is always a bit nerve-wracking.
Exactly. So today, our deep dive is all about Amazon PPC. That's pay-per-click advertising on Amazon. But the mission, it's very specific. How do you make optimizations? How do you improve your campaigns without accidentally hitting like a big reset button and losing all that momentum? That sales velocity you worked so hard to build.
Right.
It's really about finding that sweet spot between making things better and, well, not messing things up.
Right. And the source material you shared, it outlines some incredibly specific techniques for doing just that. We're going to pull out the core ideas, the data, the examples, and also the warnings so you can make informed decisions that keep your campaign strong. And, crucially, keep that momentum flowing.
Okay, so our journey today covers 8 distinct techniques that came up in the research. We'll kick things off with the fundamental idea of adjusting your bids. Then we'll move into things like handling negative keywords, adding totally new terms, managing those keyword match types, optimizing where your ads actually appear on the page, that big transition from automatic to manual campaigns.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Expanding who sees your ads, and even scheduling your ads strategically throughout the day or week. We'll tackle them one by one, pulling straight from the material.
Sounds good. Let's jump in.
Okay, first up from the sources. Adjusting bids. Now, this feels like PPC 101, maybe, but the research puts this huge emphasis on the word gradual. Why is making bid changes gradual so critical for momentum?
Well, it really boils down to what the source material calls algorithmic trust. You know, Amazon's algorithm, it's constantly evaluating your campaigns.
Yeah.
And gradual bid adjustments, meaning, small changes over time, they help preserve that trust. They sustain your sales velocity, and crucially, they avoid disrupting your organic rankings. Think of sudden, large bid changes as, like, a shock to the system.
Right.
It can trigger the algorithm to recalibrate, almost forcing it to reevaluate your ad quality and relevance, maybe from scratch.
So we're trying not to spook the algorithm. Got it. How do we even know what a right bid is in the first place, before we start adjusting gradually?
Yeah, good question. The sources actually give a pretty data-driven way to calculate a starting point, or like a target bid. It's a simple formula, basically. Your target bid equals your target ACS.
Advertising cost of sale.
Right, your ad spend as a percentage of revenue. Multiply that by your product price, and then multiply that by your conversion rate.
Okay, let's run that with an example from the research. Make it concrete.
Sure. So say you have a product selling for $50. Your conversion rate, that's the percentage of clicks turning into sales, is 10%. And your target ACOS is 25%.
Yeah. Okay.
Your calculation would be 0.25 for the ACOS times $50 times 0.1 for the conversion rate.
Right.
That gives you a target bid of $1.25. Using this formula, it grounds your bids in profitability goals, so you're not just, pulling numbers out of thin air.
Got it. So you have a target, $1.25 in that case. But
Yeah.
how do you move towards it incrementally without causing that algorithmic shock you mentioned?
Okay, this is really the core of the gradual approach. The sources strongly recommend limiting your bid changes to just 5 to 10% increments. That's it.
Just 5 to 10%. Okay.
Yeah, tiny changes. And you only make these changes every 7 to 14 days. This sort of steady, predictable pace is what stops you from triggering that recalibration. And the difference it makes, well, it's pretty dramatic according to the research.
Oh, yeah.
Campaigns using this incremental method maintain 92% of their original momentum. Compare that to just 41% for campaigns that made abrupt changes.
Wow, 92 versus 41, that's massive. It really shows why gradual is the key word.
Exactly. It's not just like a nice to have. It seems pretty essential for preserving performance. The sources even give specific guidance based on performance.
Like what?
Well, for high-performing keywords, maybe ones meeting criteria like CTR over 0.8%, CVR over 12%, ACOS near your target, you'd increase bids by just 5% weekly.
Okay.
But for underperformers, maybe CTR below 0.5%, CVR under 8%, ACOS way over target, you'd reduce bids by 5% weekly. Small, consistent nudges.
Makes sense. What about Amazon's own tools, the automated bidding options? How do they fit in with this gradual idea?
Yeah, Amazon's dynamic bidding strategies can actually complement this. Dynamic bids up and down is often suggested for newer campaigns. It can boost your impression share how often your ad shows by around 22%. It lets Amazon tweak your bid up or down, maybe 12 to 18% based on real-time conversion likelihood. Dynamic bids down only is often better for mature campaigns. The research suggests it results in about 18% less wasted spend because it only lets bids go below or stay at your base bid during low intent times.
Okay.
And then fixed bids give you total control, which could be good for stability, especially maybe for brand defense keywords.
Does it matter where you apply these bid changes? Like, do you just change everything at once?
No, definitely not. Keyword segmentation is crucial here. The sources really emphasize organizing your keywords, perhaps into different campaigns or maybe ad groups, based on the shopper's intent. This lets you make these precise, gradual adjustments without messing up everything else.
How would that look in practice?
Well, a suggested structure is dedicating maybe 60% of your budget to core performers, usually your exact match keywords. There, you make tiny tweaks, like 5% or less weekly.
Right.
Then growth targets, often phrase match, get maybe 25% of the budget, with slightly larger adjustments, say 5 to 10% every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And your exploratory terms, like broad match, might get a 15% budget, and you could pair those with the down-only dynamic bidding strategy. This kind of structure helps prevent your own keywords from competing against each other and maintains your quality score.
Quality score, that's Amazon's relevance measure.
Exactly, and it's super important.
Okay, interesting. Does when you make the changes matter too, like time of day or day of the week?
Yes, absolutely. Time-based optimization, or day parting, aligning your bid changes with when shoppers are most likely to buy, is highlighted in the material. Platforms using these time-based rules apparently saw 28 to 45% lower ACS during transitions.
Wow. Any specific examples?
Yeah, the research notes morning peaks, like 8 to 11 a.m. Pacific time, are often great for consumables. They see 1.8 times higher CTR then. So maybe a plus 10% bid increase makes sense.
Okay.
Evening peaks, maybe 7 to 10 p.m. Pacific, seem optimal for luxury or leisure goods, with 2.1 times higher conversion rates. So maybe a plus 15% increase there.
Makes sense.
And conversely, during those overnight lulls, say midnight to 5 a.m., conversions are typically lower, so reducing bids by maybe 20% could save you budget.
So it sounds like the algorithm really needs stability. How do we sort of reassure it during these changes? Are there specific tactics?
Yeah, the sources mention some specific algorithmic trust preservation tactics. One is quality score anchoring, basically. Keep 3 to 5 of your absolute top-performing keywords unchanged in their original campaigns during adjustments. They act like an anchor. Another is negative keyword mirroring. If you move keywords to a new structure, export the phrase negatives from the original campaign and apply them to the new one. It stops cannibalization. And using portfolio budgets with a 10–15% buffer helps avoid starving your best campaigns accidentally. These tactics, according to the source, can reduce those CPC spikes by 22 to 35%.
Okay, so we're making these gradual changes. We're timing them. We're segmenting.
Yeah.
How do we monitor all this? How do we know if it's actually working or if we're hurting things?
Constant monitoring is key. The sources really push using Amazon Marketing Stream for hourly tracking if possible. And there are specific warning signs to look for.
Like what?
Okay, if your click-through rate, your CTR, drops by more than 15% after a change, that's a flag. Maybe revert that last bid tweak. If your ACO spikes by over 20%, shift maybe 15% of your budget back to your core reliable terms.
Right.
And if you see your impression share dropping significantly, like your ads are showing over 25% less often, you might need to bump bids by 10% on your older stable campaigns to regain that visibility. Automated tools like iHello Autopilot or Selix are mentioned as ways to enable these real-time adjustments automatically.
Is there a way to test bigger changes more safely?
Yes, the research outlines a phased rollout protocol for testing changes over 15 days or more.
How does that work?
Days 1 to 7 are the testing phase. Use just 20% of the budget to validate your new bid logic. Days 8 to 14, the scaling phase. Use 50% budget and compare normalized metrics like CVR or ACOS per $100 spent. Day 15 onwards is the full phase. Use 100% budget and sunset the old structure if the new version shows at least a 15% efficiency gain. This phased approach, the source says, helps maintain 88 to 92% momentum retention during optimizations.
Wow. Okay, so summing up bids then.
Yeah, the key takeaways for bid adjustments are really clear from the research. Avoid those sudden shifts. Anything over a 10% bid change can reset quality scores and hurt organic rankings. Leverage automation, like dynamic rules where it makes sense because it reduces human error and respects those algorithmic rhythms. Time your adjustments strategically, align them with demand cycles and even inventory levels, and preserve your data integrity. Those gradual changes let the ANON algorithm adapt without losing historical trust. Combining these incremental adjustments with intent-based segmentation can apparently achieve 18 to 35% lower ACUS while keeping that crucial paid organic synergy going strong.
That's a really, really detailed look at just bids. Okay, so we've covered how to adjust spend carefully. What about how to stop spending on things that just aren't working? That brings us nicely to negative keywords.
Exactly. Negative keywords are absolutely essential for efficiency, right?
Yeah.
But, like you said, doing it wrong can definitely cost you momentum. Let's look at how to add them strategically based on the sources.
Right. Negative keywords stop those irrelevant clicks, save you money. But the research warns you can actually hurt momentum if you implement them incorrectly. How so?
That's right. The main goal is to filter out that irrelevant traffic without disrupting the algorithm's understanding of what does work for you. So adding the wrong negatives, or maybe too many too quickly, can damage that algorithmic trust and potentially hurt your sales velocity.
Okay, so where do you even begin? Where do you find terms to potentially block?
Well, first thing is you need data, solid data. The sources say you should wait maybe 14 to 21 days after a campaign launches, or at least until you have about 500 clicks, before you start making negative keyword decisions.
Why?
Because decisions based on less data just aren't statistically reliable. Once you have enough data, use Amazon's search term report. You're looking for terms that are clear money wasters, maybe an AQS over 150% of your target, or terms getting clicks but clearly no real interest, like a super low CTR, maybe below 0.5%, but that varies by category, or terms getting clicks but zero conversions after, say, 15 clicks or so.
Right.
But, and this is a really key warning from the source material,
Okay.
63% of terms that initially look like underperformers in week 1 actually become profitable by week 3.
63%. Wow.
Yeah. So patience is absolutely crucial. Don't jump the gun and block something too early.
That 63% stat is really eye-opening. Don't rush to judgment. Okay, so you've waited, you found some candidates. What about the match types? Negative exact versus negative phrase. Does it matter what you use?
Oh, it matters significantly, yeah. Negative exact blocks only that specific term. For example, blocking cheap wireless headphones, exactly. It's very precise, low risk, probably best reserved for terms you've confirmed are unprofitable after maybe 30 days of watching them.
Okay.
Negative phrase, on the other hand, blocks any search that contains that phrase, like blocking used wireless headphones. This gives you a better balance between reach and safety. The best practice mentioned is often to start with negative phrase match.
Why phrase first?
Well, imagine blocking just the word used as an exact match. You might accidentally block a potentially good term like use 2024 model features if you happen to sell refurbished items. Blocking used wireless headphones as a phrase is much more specific and safer for initial blocking.
That makes sense. So how do we actually add these negatives without upsetting the algorithm or losing that momentum?
The key, again, is gradual implementation. Don't just dump a list of 100 negatives in at once. The advice is, week 1, add only maybe 5 to 10 negatives per day. Just see how Amazon's system responds.
Okay, slow start.
Yeah. Then week 2, if your performance stays stable, like your CTR and CVR are within plus or minus 10%, you could maybe scale up to adding 15 to 20 per day. After week 3, if things are still looking good and stable, you could consider using automated tools for bulk additions.
And where do you put them? Campaign level? Ad group level?
That matters too. Campaign level negatives are generally best for broad exclusions, things that apply to everything in the campaign, like maybe competitor brand names or totally irrelevant categories.
Right.
Ad group level negatives are better for terms that are irrelevant only to the specific products within that ad group. And the source brings up that tactic again. Maybe keep 3 to 5 core keywords untouched, maintaining high impression share on them in campaigns where you're adding broad negatives, just as a sort of momentum protection tactic.
Okay, so they're added gradually. Is the job done then? Set it, forget it.
Definitely not. It's an ongoing process. The research suggests reevaluating your negative keywords every 14 days or so. Surprisingly, it says about 22% of terms you block might actually become relevant again later, maybe after you update your product listing or your inventory changes.
22%. Interesting.
Yeah. Also, think about conversion latency. Some terms might lead to a purchase days after the click. Don't block those too quickly. And use what they call negative keyword cascades.
Cascades.
Yeah, it prevents internal competition. If you identify a winning search term in your auto campaign and move it as an exact match to a manual campaign, you should add that exact term as a negative exact match back in the auto campaign. It forces the auto campaign to find new terms. Tools like Seller App can apparently automate this synchronization across campaigns.
Are there any common traps to avoid?
Yeah, a few pitfalls mentioned. Overblocking is one, using too many negative execs too soon. Starting with phrase helps avoid this. Underblocking is another, not being aggressive enough. AI tools like Helium-10 Atomic are mentioned for finding hidden poor performers, and mishandling seasonal terms like blocking Christmas gifts in January, maybe create temporary negative lists for holiday irrelevancies.
Okay, so summing up negatives.
Yeah, for negative keywords, the key takeaways are patience before blocking, remember that 63% stat. Start with negative phrase for safety, implement gradually, just 5-10 per day initially, and continuously monitor and refine. Doing this right, the sources suggest, leads to 18 to 35% lower ACUS, 12 to 25% higher CTR, and helps maintain that high momentum retention, around 92%.
All right, so we've refined our spending by getting rid of the irrelevant clicks. Now, what about finding new places to show up? How do we introduce new keywords to campaigns that are already working well without, messing them up?
Good question. This is all about expansion without disruption. Let's dive into how to introduce those new keywords strategically, based on the material.
So you've got a campaign that's humming along, it's profitable. How do you add fresh keywords to it without potentially throwing a wrench in the works?
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, right? You want to explore new territory, find new growth, but you absolutely have to keep your existing profitable base stable. The goal is expanding your reach without sacrificing the momentum you've already built up.
Makes sense. Where do these new keywords typically come from? How do you find them effectively?
The primary source, according to the research we looked at, is mining your automatic campaigns. Run those auto campaigns for maybe 14 to 21 days, specifically to harvest promising search terms.
What makes a term promising?
You're looking for terms with good performance metrics. Things like an AKEEK-OS that's below your target plus maybe 10%. A decent click-through rate, maybe 0.8% or higher as a guideline, though it depends on the category. And a solid conversion rate, maybe 12% or more.
Okay.
Another source mentioned is analyzing your competitors, maybe using tools like Helium-10 to see what they're targeting that you might be missing. Once you have a list of potential keywords, you need to decide on your match type strategy for testing them.
Right. How do you approach that?
Well, broad match modified, using the plus symbols, is suggested as medium risk, good for exploring semantic variants. Phrase match is seen as low to medium risk, good for validating contextual relevance. And exact match is low risk, really used for scaling terms you've already proven out.
Okay, so you find them mainly in auto campaigns, pick a match type for testing. How do you actually add them into a successful working campaign without causing problems?
There's a careful process outlined. First is bid anchoring. Start these brand new keywords at only 50 to 70% of the bids you're using on your established, high-performing legacy keywords.
Why so low?
It limits your initial spend risk while Amazon's algorithm figures out their relevance. You don't want to overcommit budget right away.
Yeah.
Second is structural isolation. Create dedicated ad groups specifically for these new keywords, but within your existing successful campaigns.
So new ad groups inside the old campaign.
Exactly. This keeps them separate from your core performers, preventing direct interference, but still lets them benefit from the campaign's overall history and authority. Third, and this is really crucial, is negative keyword cascading.
We heard that term before. How does it apply here?
You need to add your existing exact match keywords as phrase negatives in these new ad groups you just created.
Why do that?
It stops the new ad groups from stealing clicks, cannibalizing from your proven keywords. It forces Amazon to find new search term combinations for these new broad or phrase keywords you're testing in the new ad groups. It ensures you're actually exploring, not just shuffling clicks around.
That isolation and negative cascading makes a lot of sense. Okay, so they're in their own ad group, bids are low. How do you build trust with the algorithm for these new keywords? How do you scale them up?
You scale their bids based on hitting specific performance thresholds. The sources say you should only gradually increase bids when these new keywords achieve certain criteria. Maybe a 7-day CTR of 0.7% or more, a 14-day conversion rate of 10% or more, and an AKS that's at or below your target plus 15%.
Okay, performance gates.
Exactly. The research even provides a formula for scaling the bid based on how the current ATS compares to the target AQS. You also need to monitor what they call session vitality for the traffic coming from these new keywords.
Session vitality, what's that?
It's about post-click engagement. Metrics like dwell time, how long people stay on your product page after clicking. You might aim for 90 seconds or more for products that require consideration. And add to cart rate, maybe aiming for 22% or more for impulse buy items. Also, things like review velocity from ad-driven sales on these new terms. Are they leading to engaged shoppers?
Gotcha. So what happens after this initial introduction phase?
It's about optimization. Every 14 days or so, export the search terms generated by these new ad groups. Identify the winners, maybe terms with an AQS below 25%. Add these winning search terms as new exact match keywords over in your legacy proven ad groups.
Graduate the winners.
Precisely. And then negate the original broad or phrase versions of those terms back in the new ad groups to force more precision over time. You also manage budget based on performance tiers. AQS below target gets most budget and maybe 5–10% weekly bid increases. Terms way over AQS get minimal budget or get pause negated.
Are there any more advanced ways to introduce new keywords mentioned?
Yeah, a few advanced tactics. Day-parted introductions activate new keywords only during peak conversion times for your category, like 6–9 a.m. Pacific for consumables, maybe with a plus 15% bid, or 7–11 p.m. Pacific for electronics, maybe plus 20% bids. Price elasticity integration. Consider using repricing tools to temporarily lower your product price by maybe 5–7% when you launch new keywords. It can boost conversion velocity during that initial algorithmic evaluation period.
Interesting.
And review-driven expansion. Analyze your customer reviews for natural language. If people keep mentioning long battery life, test keywords like long battery life headphones.
Smart. What are the big risks here and how do you mitigate them?
Main risks are CTR cannibalization. The new term is stealing clicks from old ones. The solution mentioned is using bid plus placements on your legacy keywords to keep them visible. Budget starvation, the new terms, sucking up budget. Using portfolio budgets with a 15% buffer helps. And relevant score drop. Maintaining a 45–60% keyword overlap anchor between old and new terms initially helps prevent this.
Okay, so what's the overall outcome of doing it this way?
Well, the research suggests campaigns using this careful methodology can achieve 18–35% keyword expansion annually, while keeping their ATS pretty stable, like within 10% variance. The key really lies in respecting Amazon's 14-day algorithmic learning cycles and using those isolated ad groups to test new terms without destabilizing your proven performers. Continuous monitoring, maybe with tools like iHello Autopilot, ensures real-time adjustments, preserving that paid organic synergy that fuels long-term growth.
That's a really clear, actionable path for adding new keywords. Great stuff. Now, what about when you need to change the type of keywords you're using? Like maybe moving from broad discovery terms to more precise, exact match terms?
Yes. Changing match types. This is definitely another area where trying to go too fast can really kill your momentum. Let's explore the techniques for doing this strategically according to the sources.
Yeah, shifting from broad to exact match seems like a logical optimization for efficiency, right? But how do you make that shift without potentially losing all the volume and, well, the momentum you got from those broader terms initially?
You're right, it's a common move, but it absolutely requires a structured, gradual approach.
Yeah.
Again, the goal is preserving that algorithmic trust, maintaining sales velocity, and protecting your organic rankings during the change. It's not just a simple switch.
Okay, so structure is key again. What's the phased approach mentioned for this?
The research outlines a gradual transition framework, typically phased over about 21 days.
21 days, okay. How does that break down?
Phase 1, that's days 1 to 7. You introduce the new match type, let's say exact match, for a high-converting term you found alongside the existing one, maybe the broad or a phrase match version of that term that's already running. Critically, you allocate only about 20% of the budget for that term or concept to the new exact match structure initially.
18%, okay.
Phase 2, days 8 to 14. Now you start comparing performance. You look at normalized metrics, things like CTR, conversion rate, ACOS per, say, $100 spent between the old broad phrase version and the new exact match version. If the new exact match is meeting your performance targets, you shift maybe 40% of the budget over to it.
Only if it's performing.
Exactly. Then phase 3, days 15 to 21. This is the potential full transition. You'd sunset the old match type, pause the broader phrase version. Only if the new exact match type demonstrates a significant efficiency gain, the research suggests maybe 15% or more. And crucially, during this final cutover phase, you need to maintain about 45–60% keyword overlap.
Keyword overlap. What does that mean here?
It means you should still have related terms active in both structures, or at least closely related terms, still active in the original structure, even as you cut over the specific term. This overlap is key to preserving your quality scores during the transition. Don't just turn off everything related at once.
Got it. What about bids during this 21-day process? How do you manage those?
Bid management needs to be incremental too. Okay. Conversely, if you are transitioning to phrase match from broad, you might slightly reduce the legacy broad bid, maybe by 5%. If you are testing modified broad, with the plus symbols, you might actually increase bids by 15% initially for discovery. It's about careful adjustment. The source notes that campaigns using this gradual bid approach during match-type transitions achieve that 92% momentum retention versus only 41% with abrupt changes.
That 92 versus 41 number keeps coming up. It's clearly significant. How do you keep the algorithm happy, maintain that trust during these match-type shifts?
Similar tactics apply.
Okay.
Quality score anchoring. Keep 3 to 5 of your absolute top-performing keywords stable in their original match type throughout the transition. They act as anchors for your ad rankings.
Okay.
And session vitality monitoring is crucial. Track those post-click engagement metrics hourly if possible. Look for dwell time over 90 seconds, add to cart rate over 12%. If the traffic from your new match type keywords shows a significant decline, maybe 20% or more in these metrics for 48 hours straight, you should probably pause them and figure out why.
How should campaigns ideally be set up to handle different match types effectively in the long run?
The sources strongly recommend match-type isolation organizing campaigns, or at least ad groups, by intent or match type. This prevents cannibalization and makes optimization much simpler.
What's the suggested structure?
Typically, exact match campaign SAD groups for brand defense and your highest converting terms, maybe getting 35% of your budget. Phrase match for iterative searches like black t-shirt leading to a black v-neck t-shirt, perhaps 25% budget. And broad match for discovery and keyword harvesting, maybe 15% budget.
Negatives.
Your negative keyword strategy needs to align. Use phrase match negatives in your legacy campaigns to blank overlap as you transition. For example, if you move black t-shirt to phrase match, negate black t-shirt as a phrase in your broad campaign. Only use exact negatives for terms confirmed unprofitable after the transition is complete and stable.
What are the main warning signs to watch for during these changes?
Performance safeguards are key. If your CTR variant shows a drop greater than 15%, maybe revert to the prior match type strategy. If your ACO spikes more than 20%, redirect budget back to your core stable terms. If your impression share loss is over 25%, you might need to add plus 10% bids on your legacy keywords to regain visibility. Again, automated tools like iHello Autopilot are mentioned for enforcing these rules in real time.
What about modified broad match? Where does that fit in?
Leveraging broad match modified, adding those plus symbols before keywords like plus wireless plus headphones, is highlighted as a way to balance reach and relevance. It tells Amazon certain words must be present, but still allows its AI to explore variants, giving you more control than standard broad but more reach than phrase.
Okay, and once the transition is done, is there ongoing work?
Always. Post-transition optimization involves things like search term recycling, reevaluating any keywords you pause during the transition every 14 days, maybe using conversion latency analysis. Reactivate terms that start showing conversions again within your target ATOS. And think about the cross-match synergy. Use broad for discovery, harvest terms into phrase for refinement, then move proven winners to exact for defense and scaling. Modifiers can be used throughout this flow to maintain that balance of control and flexibility.
Okay, let's sum up the key takeaways for changing match types.
Right, the main points are, avoid sudden shifts. Those changes over 10% daily can reset quality scores and hurt organic ranks. Practice data-driven patience, use that 21-day phase transition, rely on historical data. And holistically track not just your paid metrics like ACOS and CTR, but also your organic rank stability. By combining these phase transitions with algorithmic awareness, the research suggests sellers can achieve 18 to 35% lower ACOS while sustaining that vital paid organic synergy needed for long-term success.
That's super helpful for managing keywords effectively. Now, shifting gears slightly, how about where our ads actually show up on the page? Can we improve placement, get those top spots without rocking the boat too much?
Absolutely. Optimizing ad placement is definitely key for visibility, right?
Yeah.
But just like everything else we've discussed, it needs to be done strategically to maintain campaign stability. Let's explore techniques for doing that carefully.
Yeah, getting your ad in the best spot on Amazon, especially top of search, feels like a big deal. But how do you chase that placement without making your campaigns unstable? Maybe by bidding way too aggressively.
It's definitely a balancing act. It involves using Amazon's placement multiplier strategically, maintaining that algorithmic trust, and of course, close performance monitoring.
Mm.
Amazon's feature Adjust Bids by Placement is the main tool here. It lets you set bid adjustments, multipliers from 0 all the way up to 900% for 3 key placement areas.
Right, what are those again?
Top of search, TOS, which is that prime real estate at the very top. Product pages, PP, meaning ads showing up on other product detail pages. And rest of search, ROS, which is everywhere else on the search results page that isn't the top.
So how do you use those multipliers strategically? What are the recommendations?
Okay, for top of search, TOS, where you typically find high-intent shoppers, the sources recommend a multiplier somewhere in the +50 to +200% range. It's competitive, but it can significantly improve your click-through rate, maybe 1.8 to 2.5 times higher. You want to prioritize your high-intent keywords here.
Makes sense. What about product pages?
For product pages, PP, the recommendation is generally lower, maybe +0 to +50%. CPCs tend to be lower here, and you're targeting shoppers already looking at related or competitor products. It's good for leveraging competitor traffic or cross-selling.
And rest of search?
For rest of search, ROS, the suggestion is often to use a negative multiplier, maybe -10 to -30%. This gives you wider reach, but potentially lower conversion rates, so reducing bids here can help cut down on wasted spend on lower converting queries.
Can you give an example of how that math works?
Sure. Let's say your base bid for a keyword is $1. A top of search multiplier of +150% makes your effective bid for that top spot $2.50. A product page multiplier of +30% makes your bid $1.30 on those pages. And a rest of search multiplier of -20% makes your bid steer 80 cents for those other placements.
Got it. Can we combine these placement multipliers with Amazon's automated bidding strategies like dynamic bids?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources highlight the synergy here. Combining placement multipliers with automated strategies can be really powerful. Well, using dynamic bids up and down, along with a high top-of-search multiplier, means your bid can effectively double again for high-conversion clicks in that prime spot. So that $2.50 effective bid could potentially go up to $5 if Amazon sees a very high likelihood of conversion. But the algorithmic guardrails help prevent constant overbidding. A case study mentioned showed a campaign using 2S plus 150%, with dynamic bids up-down achieved 22% higher CTR, 18% lower ACS, and maintained 92% retention of organic rank stability.
Wow, that's impressive synergy. What about down only?
Dynamic bids down only works well with maybe negative ROS multipliers, as it limits bids to be less than or equal to your base bid during low-intent periods, protecting your budget further in those less valuable placements. And fixed bids, again, give full control, may be good for brand defense, where you always want to bid your set amount for certain placements.
Okay, so you've decided on your multipliers. How do you actually implement these changes without disrupting stability? Is it gradual again?
You guessed it. A phased implementation protocol over about 14 days is recommended. Days 1 to 7. Apply your new placement multipliers to only about 20% of your budget. During this week, closely monitor your session vitality score. Are people engaging with your page from these placements?
Okay, start small, watch engagement.
Exactly. Days 8 to 14. You can scale the multipliers up to 50% of your budget, but only if your CTR variance is staying low, like less than a 15% drop, and your ACOS is performing well, at or below your target plus 10%.
Right.
Day 15 onwards. You can fully roll out the placement adjustments if you see a positive conversion lift coefficient, or CLC. That's calculated as your post-change conversion rate divided by your pre-change conversion rate. If that CLC is 1.1 or higher, it suggests the placement changes are boosting conversions.
CLC, okay, that's a useful metric. What about the fact that users just tend to click the top ad more often anyway? How do you optimize around that position bias?
Good point. The sources mention position bias mitigation tactics. One is creative optimization. Constantly test different ad images, headlines, maybe 3 to 5 variants monthly, to improve relevance and appeal at all positions, not just the top. Also, use re-ranking signals. Add back-end keywords that specifically match the context where your ads might show on product pages, like terms related to frequently bought with. And price anchoring. If you have a discount, make sure that percentage off is clearly visible in your top of search ads to help justify those potentially higher placement bids to the shopper.
Does inventory tie into placement strategy at all?
Critically, you need inventory-aligned bidding to prevent running out of stock, which would completely waste any gains you made in placement. The key is calculating your inventory stress coefficient, or ISC.
How do you calculate that?
The formula is ISC daily sales inventory days remaining. Then you adjust your placement multipliers based on your ISC range.
Okay, what are the ranges?
If your ISC is low, less than 0.8, meaning lots of stock, you could actually increase bids maybe plus 25% on TOS and plus 10% on PP to move inventory faster. If ISC is in a healthy range, zero point 0.8 to 1.2, you probably don't need to change anything. But if your ISC is high, over 1.5, meaning stock is low, you should reduce your bids significantly, maybe mega 50% on TOS and mega 30% on PP, to slow down sales and prevent stocking out.
That makes total sense linking ad aggression to stock levels. What are the warning signs during placement optimization?
Similar performance safeguards apply. If CTR variance drops more than 15%, maybe revert to your prior multipliers. If ACS spikes over 20%, shift 15% of the budget towards lower-cost placements like ROS. If impression share loss exceeds 25%, you might need to add plus 10% bids on your core keywords to regain visibility.
Can you use placement strategically against competitors?
Yes, some competitive defense tactics are mentioned. Daypart overbidding, increase your bids by maybe 30% during times your rivals tend to run out of stock.
Yeah.
You might identify these using tools like Keepa charts. Also, ASIN targeting. Mirror your top competitors' product page placements by bidding maybe 80% of their estimated CPC on those specific ASNs. And maintain good review velocity, at least 4 reviews per week, as that helps sustain eligibility for top-of-search placements.
Okay, let's summarize placement optimization.
Key takeaways for placement. Gradual scaling is crucial. Limit those placement bid changes to maybe 20% or less weekly to preserve quality scores. Aim for algorithmic harmony. Use dynamic bids up-down strategically with multipliers for auto-optimization where appropriate. And practice holistic monitoring. Track both paid metrics like CTR and ACS and your organic rank stability. By combining strategic bid adjustments with being inventory aware, the sources suggest sellers can improve placement efficiency while maintaining 85 to 92% of their existing campaign momentum.
That makes a lot of sense. Targeting where shoppers are, but also making sure you align with your stock. Okay, what about a bigger structural shift? Moving from automatic campaigns, where Amazon does a lot of the heavy lifting, to manual campaigns where you get much more control.
Yes, moving from automatic to manual. That's a really big step for gaining control and potentially boosting efficiency. But it definitely needs a careful, methodical approach to keep that hard-earned momentum intact. Let's walk through the steps outlined in the research.
Yeah, manual campaigns offer so much more control, but that transition from auto, where Amazon finds keywords for you, to manual, where you in charge, feels pretty risky. What's the right way, the safe way to do it?
It really is about a methodical approach, step by step. The first step, before you even think about manual, is data collection and analysis from your existing automatic campaign.
How long do you need to run the auto campaign?
You need to run your automatic campaigns for at least 14 to 21 days. This gives Amazon's algorithm enough time to gather sufficient data on what works and what doesn't. You're looking to identify a few key things in that data.
Like what specifically?
High-performing keywords. Those are search terms that generated maybe 3 or more conversions and have an AKOS at or below your target, plus maybe 15%. You also need to identify irrelevant search terms, queries, that got clicks but 0 conversions, or have a really high ATOS, maybe over 150%. And look at session vitality metrics associated with terms, like dwell time and add-to-cart rates.
Where do you find all this?
You need to download the search term report from the advertising console, go to Reports, then Sponsored Products. This report is absolutely key. It's basically your roadmap. It tells you which are the top 10 or 20 converting keywords you'll want to target in your manual campaign and which low-performing terms you'll want to add as negatives later.
Okay, report downloaded, you've identified your winners and losers. How do you actually set up the new manual campaign?
For the manual campaign setup, you want to create a new manual campaign that mirrors the product focus of your automatic campaign. Structure it using intent-based ad groups.
Like we discussed before.
Exactly. An exact match ad group for your proven high-converting keywords, like wireless headphones. A phrase match ad group for relevant variations, like noise-canceling wireless headphones. And maybe a broad match ad group, perhaps using modifiers, for continued discovery, like plus wireless plus headphones.
What about bids in this new manual campaign?
For the exact match keywords you're bringing over, the suggestion is to start with bids that are about 110% of the average cost per click, CPC, you saw for those terms in your automatic campaign. A slight bump. And maybe use the dynamic bids down only strategy initially to help prevent overspending while it gets established.
And budget. How much goes to the new manual campaign?
Budget allocation needs to be gradual too. Start by allocating only about 30 to 40% of the original automatic campaign's budget to the new manual campaign initially.
Okay, but now you have an auto and a manual campaign running for the same products. How do you make sure they don't compete with each other and inflate your costs?
This is an absolutely essential step. Negative keyword implementation. You need to prevent internal competition. The way you do this is by adding the exact keywords that you've just migrated over to your manual campaign as negative exact matches back in your original automatic campaign.
Can you walk through that?
Sure. Export the list of high-performing keywords you just put into your manual campaign's exact match ad group. Go into your automatic campaign settings, find the negative keyword section, and add that list of keywords there, specifically as negative exact matches. So if wireless headphones is now running in your manual exact ad group, you add wireless headphones as a negative exact in the auto campaign. This stops the auto campaign from bidding on that specific term.
Ah, okay, that forces the auto campaign to find other terms. Smart. How do you handle shifting the budget over time?
You need a gradual budget transition. Phase the budget shifts over maybe 14 to 21 days to allow performance to stabilize.
What does that phasing look like?
Week 1 might be 70% budget on the automatic campaign, 30% on the new manual. Monitor the CTR and CVR parity between the two. Are they performing similarly? Week 2, if things look good, maybe shift to 50% auto, 50% manual. Start adjusting bids within the manual campaign based on its ACO's performance. Week 3 and beyond, you could shift further, maybe 20% auto, 80% manual.
Can you eventually turn off the auto campaign completely?
You can, yes, if the manual campaign is consistently meeting all your key performance indicators, KPIs. However, the source material actually suggests it might be beneficial to keep the automatic campaign running, even long-term, but at a small budget level, maybe just 10 to 20%.
Why keep it running?
For ongoing keyword discovery. It can continue to surface new, relevant search terms that you might miss otherwise.
Okay, so the manual campaign is up and running, budget is shifted. What ongoing optimizations are needed specifically for this transition campaign?
It requires continuous post-transition optimization. Bid adjustments are key. Once performance is stable, start making those small weekly bid increases, 5–10% for keywords meeting your criteria, good CTR, CVR, ROAS. Decrease bids weekly by 5% for terms consistently performing above your target ACOS. Match type expansion, maybe after 14 days of stability. Add phrase match variants of your top exact keywords to capture more related searches. Introduce broad match modified terms with plus symbols for further discovery within the manual structure. And search term harvesting is crucial. Review the search terms report from your manual campaign weekly. Add newly discovered converting queries as new exact or phrase keywords, and block any irrelevant terms that slip through using negative phrase matches.
How do you protect that algorithmic trust during this whole auto-to-manual migration?
Similar principles apply for algorithmic trust preservation. Quality score anchoring. Keep maybe 3–5 of your absolute core keywords running stably, perhaps in the original match type that performed well in auto during the transition, and have performance safeguards in place. If CTR variance drops more than 15%, revert recent bid changes. If AQS spikes over 20%, reallocate budget toward your top performers. If impression share loss exceeds 25%, consider adding plus 10% bids on your legacy keywords, the ones still active maybe in the low-budget auto campaign, to maintain visibility.
Any other important things to keep in mind during this transition?
A few key considerations mentioned. That hybrid approach, keeping auto active at a low budget for discovery. Inventory sync is vital. Ensure you have sufficient stock levels, maybe 115–130% coverage of expected sales, to avoid stock-out-induced ranking drops during the transition period. And competitor defense, use your new, more precise manual campaigns to strategically target rival AS, perhaps specifically during times, they might be low on stock.
Okay, so what's the outcome? What are the benefits of this careful transition?
By following this structured, gradual approach, the research suggests sellers can transition to manual campaigns while retaining about 92% of their original momentum. And post-transition, they often achieve 18 to 35% lower AQS due to the increased precision. The phase budget reallocation and the algorithmic safeguards ensure stability, while the manual targeting unlocks the precision needed for scalable, efficient growth.
That really covers getting more control over keywords and bids through manual campaigns. What about reaching entirely new shoppers? How do you expand who sees your ads without risking the success you have with your current audience?
Right, reaching new audiences is obviously key for growth, but it absolutely needs careful handling. You want to avoid diluting your performance, wasting budget, or confusing the algorithm about who your ideal customer is. Let's look at the strategies outlined for expanding your audience while protecting that existing momentum.
Yeah, finding new customers is always the goal, right? But how do you advertise to them without potentially messing up your campaigns that are already working well for your existing customer base?
It really comes down to careful audience segmentation and very controlled budget allocation. Amazon offers specific tools designed for this, particularly within sponsored display, focusing on audience expansion.
What are these tools or audience types Amazon gives us?
The source material highlights sponsored display audience expansion and mentions 4 specific new audience types you can target. First, in-market audiences. These are users Amazon has identified as actively shopping within your specific product category, even if they haven't seen your product yet, like targeting users currently shopping for electronics headphones.
Okay, people already looking in the category.
Second, lifestyle audiences. These are broader demographic and interest-based segments, like targeting fitness enthusiasts if you sell workout gear. Third, views purchases remarketing. This lets you target users based on their past interactions with related products or categories, using custom look-back windows, maybe from 7 to 90 days, so people who viewed or bought similar items. And fourth, something called trending prospecting. This sounds like an AI-driven feature that tries to match emerging product trends with relevant user behavior patterns.
How do you implement targeting for these new audiences?
The key recommendation is to create dedicated campaigns specifically for these new audience types. Don't just add them into your existing campaigns. And critically, allocate only a small portion of your total budget to them initially, maybe just 15 to 20%. You also need to use negative keyword mirroring or audience exclusions to prevent overlap with your existing high-performing campaigns that target your proven keywords and audiences. Keep them separate.
Makes sense to isolate the testing. How do you make sure the algorithm doesn't see this audience expansion as instability, potentially hurting your core campaigns?
You need specific algorithmic trust preservation tactics here. Core campaign isolation is number 1. Keep the bulk of your budget, around 80%, focused on the proven keywords and products in your original campaigns. Maybe even apply bid plus placements, like plus 25% bids on your top 3 to 5 core keywords to really lock in that top of search visibility for your core high-converting audience.
Protect the core.
Exactly. And practice gradual budget scaling for the new audience campaigns. Phase the budget increases over multiple weeks. Maybe week 1 gets 10-15% of the expansion budget, week 2 gets 20-25%, week 3 and beyond gets 30-35%. But only scale further if these new audience campaigns are achieving a solid return on ad spend, ROAS. The research suggests maybe 3.5 or higher as a benchmark. Don't pour money in if they aren't converting profitably.
Can we reach audiences outside of Amazon as well using Amazon's data?
Yes, the sources mentioned leveraging the Amazon DSP demand-side platform for more advanced targeting techniques. Cross-channel prospecting. You can use DSP to retarget off-Amazon audiences users who visited your own website or app, for instance. You could also expand reach to connected TV ads on platforms like Fire TV or Freevee, maybe specifically targeting peak viewing hours like 7 to 11 p.m.
How do bids work for those off-Amazon placements?
The recommendation is to start bids lower, maybe at 50% of your typical Amazon CPC for these off-platform placements, and use dynamic cost per mile CPM bidding, which optimizes for viewability rather than just clicks.
What about the ads themselves for these new audiences?
AI-powered creative optimization is mentioned. Tools like iHello Autopilot can apparently generate dynamic banners that adapt based on user preferences. The advice is to A/B test 3 to 5 ad variants weekly, possibly using machine learning predictions to guide the testing.
Okay, when you're expanding to these new audiences, what are the warning signs? What tells you things might be going wrong?
You need clear performance safeguards, ideally monitored hourly via Amazon Marketing Stream if possible. If your CTR variance drops more than 15% overall, you might need to pause the new audiences and analyze what's happening. If your overall ACS spikes more than 20%, maybe reallocate 15% of your budget back to your core campaigns.
Oh, okay.
If your overall session vitality score drops below maybe 75 out of 100, it could indicate that your product detail pages aren't resonating with these new audiences, suggesting you need to optimize your listing itself. And inventory buffering is crucial here too. Use that inventory stress coefficient, ISC. If ISC is low, 0.8, maybe delay the expansion until you restock. If it's healthy, 0.8, 1.2, is generally safe. If it's high, 1.5, reduce bids on the new audience campaigns by 50% to prevent stockouts driven by the new traffic.
So once these new audiences start working, how do you integrate what you've learned back into your main strategy?
Good question. Post-expansion optimization involves a few things. Search term recycling. Harvest any converting search queries generated by these new audience campaigns weekly. Add the top performers to your existing core campaigns as exact match keywords, maybe with slightly higher bids, plus 10%.
Bring the winners back home.
Exactly. Also, lookalike audience building. Use tools like Amazon's Audience Insights to create audiences that resemble the buyers of your best-selling assigns, product-based lookalikes, or users who mirror your high-intent searchers. Behavioral lookalikes, like people searching wireless headphones 2025.
How do you bid on those lookalikes?
Start bids lower, maybe at 80% of your core campaign CPC. Increase bids gradually, maybe 5% per day, if their CTR is solid, say 0.7% or higher.
Okay, any final key points on expanding reach safely?
The main takeaways are: compartmentalized experiments put new audiences in separate campaigns with tightly controlled budgets. Ensure algorithmic harmony maintains some keyword overlap, maybe 45–60%, with legacy campaigns initially to provide stability. And leverage AI tools for automating bids and creative optimization where possible. By combining Amazon's expanded audience tools with phased budget scaling and careful monitoring, the research suggests sellers can achieve 22 to 35% wider reach while preserving about 92% of their original campaign momentum. Continuous monitoring ensures adjustments align with both growth and stability goals.
So we've covered keywords, bids, placements, the auto-to-manual transition, and reaching new people. The last technique mentioned in the sources is about when your ads show. How do you schedule ads at different times of day or week to keep performance consistent and protect that momentum?
Right. Timing is everything, as they say. And not just seasonally, but even within the day or the week. Strategic time-based scheduling is crucial for maintaining consistent performance by balancing, yet again, algorithmic trust, budget efficiency, and aligning with those consumer behavior patterns. Let's wrap up our look at specific techniques by examining how time-based scheduling helps maintain consistent Amazon PPC performance.
Does it really matter that much what time of day or day of week your ads run on Amazon?
Oh, it can matter significantly, yes. While Amazon's system has its own budget pacing mechanisms trying to spread spend out.
Right, trying not to run out of budget by lunchtime?
Exactly. Those mechanisms aim to distribute spend somewhat evenly. But you can, and probably should, influence this based on when shoppers are actually most active and most likely to convert for your products. This involves strategies for both daily and weekly pacing.
How does that work?
For daily pacing, you might allocate, say, 70 to 80% of your daily budget to peak hours, maybe 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and reserve the remaining 20 to 30% for off-peak times. For weekly pacing, you might reserve 40 to 50% of your total weekly budget, specifically for high conversion days, which are often weekends for many categories.
Can tools help with this pacing?
Yeah, automated tools or strategies can help. Using Amazon's dynamic bids down only during known low impression or low conversion periods like overnight helps maintain a healthy session vitality score. The goal mentioned is 810 to 100, by not wasting spend when shoppers are less engaged.
Okay, but Amazon doesn't have a native built-in hour-by-hour scheduling feature for manual bids, right? So how do we control when ads show more precisely?
You're right, there's no simple hourly on-off switch in the main interface for manual campaigns. But you can achieve a similar result effective day parting through manual bid adjustments based on time-specific performance data.
How would you set that up?
You'd analyze your data to find your peak and off-peak hours. During peak hours, maybe 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but it varies, when shopper intent is likely higher, you'd increase bids by maybe plus 15 to plus 25%. This helps capture those high-intent shoppers and can improve CTR significantly, 1.8 to 2.5 times, according to one source.
Okay.
During off-peak hours, like 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., when conversion rates are typically lower, you'd reduce bids, maybe by negative 20 to negative 30%. This cuts down wasted spend on low-conversion traffic.
How do you implement these hourly changes?
Since Amazon doesn't offer it natively for manual bids, you'll likely need third-party tools. iHello or Selix were mentioned again to automate these hourly bid rules. The key is to align these adjustments with your actual sales velocity trends, perhaps increasing bids during known surges like post-lunch 1 to 3 p.m. or evening browsing 7 to 9 p.m.
Can this manual day parting approach be combined with Amazon's own dynamic bidding strategies?
Yes, absolutely. Dynamic bidding synergy applies here too. Using dynamic bids up and down can allow Amazon to bid even higher during those peak hours you've identified with your manual adjustments if it also sees a high conversion likelihood at that specific moment. Fixed bids could be used for critical brand defense keywords that you want consistently visible, perhaps especially during competitor stockouts, regardless of the time of day.
What about different days of the week? Is that just about weekends?
Day-of-week optimization goes beyond just weekends. You adjust bids based on those weekly shopping rhythms. Maybe increase bids by plus 20–30% on weekends for discretionary categories like electronics or hobbies. But you might increase bids by plus 10–15% on weekdays, maybe Tuesday through Thursday, for replenishable items like household goods or groceries, when people might do midweek top-ups.
Does inventory play a role in ad scheduling too?
Critically, inventory-aware scheduling is essential. You need to sync your ad activity, particularly your bids during peak times, with your stock levels using that inventory stress coefficient, ISC, again.
Remind me of the formula.
ISC equals daily sales inventory days remaining.
Okay. And the rule is based on ISC.
If ISC is low, zero point 0.8, plenty of stock, you might actually reduce bids slightly overall, maybe 25% cut across all times, to slow down velocity and prevent potential long-term stockout issues if replenishment is slow. If ISC is healthy, 0.8, 1.2, maintain your current scheduling strategy. But if ISC is high, 1.5, danger zone, you might need to pause ads completely, especially during peak hours, until you restock. This aligns with an analogy mentioned in the source about not driving traffic to an empty shelf.
Makes total sense. How does competitor activity affect scheduling decisions?
Competitive avoidance tactics come into play. Use bid shading, slightly lowering your bids, maybe 10–15% during times, a major rival's running a big flash sale. You might identify these using tools like Keeper. Conversely, use assign targeting to counter competitor downtime, increase your bids by plus 20% on their specific product pages during times you suspect they might be out of stock or having issues.
Can other marketing efforts outside Amazon inform your ad scheduling?
Definitely. Cross-channel reinforcement is powerful. Coordinate your Amazon ad schedule with your off-Amazon campaigns, like Google Ads or social media pushes. Amplify your peak Amazon ad hours, like 7–9 p.m., by synchronizing promotions or content drops across all platforms simultaneously. You could even use Amazon DSP to retarget users on Amazon who interacted with your brand off Amazon during those specific peak times.
Are there tools that can help predict the best times to advertise?
Yes. The sources mention machine learning forecasting tools, like CPFP or Ish80. These tools can leverage 90-day historical data to forecast hourly conversion rates for your specific products. They can then automatically adjust your bids in real time to try and meet your ROAS targets during those predicted high-value windows.
And what are the performance checks for scheduling?
Similar performance safeguards apply. If overall CTR variance drops more than 15% after implementing scheduling rules, maybe revert to baseline bids. If ATS spikes over 20%, shift budget back towards your historically proven high conversion hours only. If impression share loss exceeds 25%, you might need to add plus 10% bids on your core keywords to regain essential visibility.
Okay, let's wrap up the key takeaways for scheduling ads.
Right, the main points are: respect algorithmic learning, limit those daily bid changes, even time-based ones, to maybe 10% or less to preserve quality scores. Leverage automation, use dynamic rules and third-party tools to adapt to real-time trends without constant manual intervention. And practice holistic monitoring, track both your ad metrics, CTR, ACOS, and your organic rank stability. By integrating these scheduling strategies, the research suggests sellers can achieve 18–35% lower ACOS while maintaining that crucial 92% of original momentum, ensuring ads perform consistently across all relevant time segments.
Wow. Okay, that was a true deep dive into 8 specific, really data-driven techniques mentioned in the sources for protecting your Amazon PPC momentum while you optimize.
Yeah, it covered a lot of ground. We started with the fundamentals, gradual bid adjustments and strategic negative keywords. Then we moved into carefully introducing new keywords and changing match types without causing chaos. We also explored optimizing where your ads show up those placements and the tactical steps for making that big transition from automatic to manual campaigns. And finally, we looked at expanding your audience reach safely and using time-based scheduling to align with shopper behavior.
What's the big picture here? How do all these sort of seemingly separate techniques connect?
Well, they're all really unified by one core principle: the absolute necessity of maintaining algorithmic trust and sales velocity. Amazon's A9 algorithm, it's constantly monitoring a whole bunch of metrics, things like session vitality, quality score, that inventory stress coefficient, even something called the organic rank migration index. Consistency and health in these key areas, driven by these kinds of strategic gradual optimizations, that's what the algorithm rewards with better placement and ultimately lower advertising costs.
What were some of the key numbers or findings that really stood out from the research as we went through this?
I think the power of small incremental changes was a really strong recurring theme. Limiting bid changes to just 5–10% daily or weekly, or budget shifts to 10–20%, versus the massive drop in momentum seen with large abrupt changes. That 92% versus 41% retention figure really sticks. Also, the importance of maintaining keyword overlap, maybe 45–60%, during transitions like changing match types or moving keywords, that seemed vital for preserving quality scores. And the specific benefits mentioned were quite significant. 18–35% lower ATS potential, 12–25% higher CTR, and those high momentum retention rates when these careful approaches are used. Critical metrics like HES variance, CTR variance, CVR changes, impression share loss, and that inventory stress coefficient, those are your crucial health check dashboards.
How can our listeners actually apply all this information in the real world?
Well, these aren't just theories, right? They're actionable methods for managing Amazon PPC effectively in lots of different situations. Whether you're launching a brand new product, scaling up a growing one, defending a mature ASI and against competitors, adapting to seasonal demand shifts, responding to competitor actions, or even recovering from a sudden performance drop, these principles apply.
It sounds like knowing how to implement these steps correctly and using the right data and potentially the right tools is absolutely key.
Exactly. Leveraging the tools Amazon provides, like the search term reports and Amazon Marketing Stream, is fundamental. And using third-party platforms where appropriate Helium 10, Seller App, Tychometrics, AdBrew were mentioned, can provide the deeper data analysis needed to make really informed decisions and, crucially, automate many of these gradual changes, which can be hard to do manually at scale.
So it's really not about making drastic overnight changes, but more about smart, informed evolution of your campaigns.
Yes, I think that's the perfect way to put it. It's about finding that balance. Well, sure, quick wins like a timely promotion can give you a short-term boost. Sustaining momentum over the long haul really relies on respecting Amazon's algorithmic rhythms. And you do that through strategic patience and being constantly aware of how your changes impact the whole ecosystem.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive into maintaining momentum while optimizing your Amazon PPC campaigns. Hopefully you feel well-informed and maybe ready to apply some of these techniques carefully.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how much consistency and, yeah, patience matters in such a dynamic, fast-moving environment like Amazon advertising.
It really is. Here's a final thought to leave you with, pulled from the essence of the material we explored today. In the fast-paced world of Amazon advertising, where everything feels incredibly urgent, perhaps the most powerful optimization technique of all is, counterintuitively, strategic patience. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure. Until next time.
See you on the next one.